Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Utah County Republican Party official podcast. I'm your vice chair and the host of the show, Charles Max Wood. And today we're talking to Phil Lyman, who's running for governor. Now, before I let him do the intro, I just want to tell just a really brief, funny story. So on Saturday, me and my two boys were out putting up signs for Trent Staggs and Phil Lyman out here in Lehigh. And they were standing on the sidewalk. They were holding the Phil Lyman sign. And, I'm banging in this post so that we can put it up where people can see it. And this car stops. And, the guy rolls down the window and he goes, "Hey, thanks for putting up those signs." And I'm like, "No, thank you for being involved." And he's like, "No, seriously, I mean it. Thank you." And I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, that guy looks a whole lot like Phil Lyman. But it was a little bit far away, and I'm like, what are the odds? I mean, it's astronomical that it's the guy. And then he goes, "But I'm Phil Lyman." And I'm like, oh, no kidding. So funny enough, yeah, this guy, the guy that I have right here.
So that was you.
That was me and my two boys.
You were wearing a hat, and I wasn't at the time. And yeah, you look.
Yeah.
Oh, that's yeah.
Oh. Hot
good
sweaty
job.
work, but
that was a hot day. That's what we said. Man, they're out in this sun pounding fence posts. That's commitment. That's dedication.
Yeah,
so
and we had just walked in the Saratoga Springs Parade for Heidi Baldery, and so
nice.
Yeah, so we were a little overheated, but we got it done. So
that was a hot day. Saturday was a big day. We were out in Saratoga Springs too at the Utah shooting thing that morning.
Oh, okay.
So crazy day.
Yeah. But anyway, so serendipity. But anyway, I've asked people for when we get started the same question, and I think it's relevant for you too, is if people are trying to make a decision on who they're going to vote for in the primary, what do they need to know about Phil Lyman to make the right decision?
Well, I guess my background, I'm a CPA. I've had my own CPA firm for many years, a small firm in Blanding, Utah, but we've done some really big things. Started some serious companies that have had international effect and definitely a big effect on Utah. Great little firm, and they're operating now in my absence. Got good people there. Ran for the county commission because of some what I viewed as collusion between federal agents and environmentalist groups that were affecting policy that was affecting my clients and my community and my area there in a dramatic way. And I thought, well, that's not the way these agencies are supposed to work. They're supposed to work with county commissioners. And I didn't see the county commissioners putting up much of a fight, which then makes you wonder, are they part of it? Are they promoting it? Where do they stand on this? And all the curiosity of those things and studying what was happening. I finally decided to run for county commissioner, and I did that and kept asking questions. It ended up getting me in all kinds of hot water and trouble. And
it does that sometimes.
Yeah. Ultimately, if you take on the federal government, they tend to take you on. And so after, IRS audits and everything else that comes as a result of that, then they decided to prosecute me for the event that we had down there. And I ended up going to jail for 10 days. Fortunately, it wasn't the 2 years that they had started out wanting. Got out, ran for the state legislature. Turns out that people in my district kind of respect somebody that stands up to the Bureau of Land Management because they know the weaponization that happens there. They see it. They've experienced it. So
especially down in your area.
Yeah, for a lot of people, that's kind of an abstract thought and maybe even an offensive thought to say that the federal government would actually weaponize against people. At least it was a few years ago. I think more people are feeling it now and observing it. But running for the state legislature, I won that race pretty easily, and then got into the state legislature. Ended up getting a pardon from Donald Trump in December of 2020, after everything was all behind me at that point. And so those are things that have kind of I guess maybe informed who I am. And for me, it's all about, statehood and standing up for what is a state. And it's funny because I've got a good friend who wrote a book, Bill Redd and Bill Howell together wrote a book called Statehood, the Territorial Imperative. And that's what I was reading back in 2009 when the BLM decided to raid Blanding. And And so I'm looking at this statehood book and thinking, hey, we're doing it wrong. States
Hmm.
are not administrative subunits of the federal government. We should be standing up for the people and standing our ground on these issues, not just going along with federal mandates, but actually pushing back aggressively
Hmm.
when it's appropriate. So statehood is a big thing, and that's kind of been my path. I guess that's what's brought me to this point.
Yeah. Well, and just to kind of pile on this a little bit, because I don't think people realize I ran for school board, and so I looked into some of these issues, and a lot of the things that we're concerned about in the schools come from federal programs. In 2022, it was 28% of the state's budget came from federal money that had strings attached to it. I think it was 26% in 2023. So I guess that's marginally better. I don't know.
29%, and I think
Oh,
it's 20
29%.
26% for this upcoming. So yeah, but we
Yeah.
hit 29%. But
Right. So,
yeah.
yeah. Go ahead.
I didn't really answer your question. Why should they vote for
Yeah.
Phil Lyman? That's a little bit of the background. If they want to know the truth about what's going on in government, they should elect me because I'll tell them the truth about it. I'm not there to hide any of the issues that I think Utah faces. I think our election systems are weak, and I want to dig into that.
Mhm.
And if people want to see what's really happening with our elections, they should elect somebody different than what's there now.
Right.
If they want Utah to push back against federal policies, whether it's invasion of our southern borders or invasion of our second grade classrooms with ideologies that we disagree with, I think they need to elect somebody that's willing to push back. And I'm not an angry person. I'm not a flamethrower, but I do like the truth, and I usually don't settle for something less than what I believe is an honest an honest effort on telling people the truth. So that's what we're about in the Phil Lyman campaign.
Yep, absolutely. I want to hit a couple of these and then we can kind of go deeper because, you're kind of, how do I put it? You're setting yourself up to say, hey, look, this is what we're getting and this is what we should be getting, right? And
Right.
so there's a difference there that I think is important to highlight. And I don't necessarily want to go on the attack, but it's fascinating to know. I also want to just briefly mention you mentioned election integrity or the elections a couple of times, and your running mate Natalie Clausen has done a ton of work on election integrity and some of the concerns that we have about our elections here in Utah. And she'd be the one running those elections because she'd be the lieutenant governor if you're elected. And so, that for me is a major point in her favor, at least, is to say, hey, look, somebody who knows this and understands where the transparency is, that's a great choice. Uh, but yeah, let's talk about this contrast, I guess, between what we're getting and what we should be getting, right? Um, in fact, it was I got a text from my neighbor while we were at the convention, and he had just seen the news that you had gotten the nomination at the convention, and he goes, why did the convention pick Lyman? Right. And so I'm explaining, this is what we've been getting. This is what we should be getting. But what's your explanation of this, right? What are we getting? What should we be getting? Like where is the difference and where are we seeing it in our day-to-day lives as regular citizens here in Utah?
I think some people view the power dynamic in government as a top-down dynamic, and for good reason. It has been through history. That's
Yeah.
the who's got the power and those that are the subjects and the effect of that. And so you see this top-down view of power. And in America, we created an experiment on liberty that said, that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, and that if governments that go against that, we've got a right to throw them off and get new guards for our
Hmm.
security and our liberty. And it's such an American thing and a Republican form of government thing. Um, and that's I guess that's the same thing that I keep bringing to the forefront is that power should be from the bottom up. And when I look at how Utah has, adopted the DEI compact, how we've jumped on the climate change thing. The only Republican state in the country to join Biden's American Climate Corps, which is out now actively teaching college age students about all the benefits of the Biden energy plan. which is to
Hmm.
shut down all energy production in the United States, ironically. Um, so we see the federal government way out of its lane, I think, in Utah, and then we see the
Yeah.
state stepping in and taking over responsibilities that should be delegated to the counties, taking over management of water, taking over their clerks' autonomy,
Mhm.
taking over sheriff's autonomy, and centralizing a lot of decisions at the state level. So if I were the governor, I would put things back in their proper lanes. Federal government has a lane, and that's a really important one. And when it encroaches on state powers that were not delegated to the federal, or yeah, that weren't specifically delegated, we'd be jealous and suspicious guardians of those powers. And the legislative would be separate from the executive. Right now, you've got an executive branch in Utah that really loves to collude and work
Hmm.
out all of their problems with all the industry and all the people at the table. And so we get these bills that come from the UEOC, the Utah Economic Opportunity Commission, which is the governor, the Speaker of the House, President of the Senate. You got people all there in there drafting legislation. That then when it comes to the legislature, it's a like must pass legislation because it's got all the buy-in already from all the people who should be like,
Hmm.
maybe discussing, is this a good idea or is this a bad idea? It's like, oh no, we already discussed that. So then as a legislator, you're saying, well, where was I when this discussion was going on? Well, you weren't invited to the table because this was done, uh, you know, behind closed doors essentially. And now you're getting to hear about it and you find out, oh, these are coming from, the Governors Association, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, these things that roll down. Um, I'm probably getting off track, but that's the dynamics. Let's have a strong executive. Let's have a strong legislative branch in Utah that has some healthy friction between them and secures the freedoms of the
Right.
people. Let's push back on the federal government. Let's push power back to the people. Disperse that out as much as we can, whether it's through the school boards or the county
Hmm.
commissions or your water conservancy districts. And we're going to have a state that runs much better when we do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think a lot of us, especially, because I work at the county level, a lot of people are going, hey, the closer this gets to me, the better, right? If it's my city council, if it's my county commission, if they're making those calls based on what we need here in Utah County, or I live in Lehigh, right? What we need in Lehigh, or maybe it talks, Lehigh talks to Saratoga and, American Fork, and hey, look, we all have the same concern. Let's work together on this. It makes a whole lot more sense than having all the disparate people across the whole state because the issues are different, right? I mean, you live down in Blanding. The first election I ever worked in, actually, I was the tech support for the county clerk, working on the
Nice.
Diebold touchscreens.
Oh yeah.
And so I would drive down on Monday, drive down to
Huh.
Monticello, and then drive back, right? And so, but the people down there had completely different concerns, right? Because it's a rural area. You're right next to the Navajo reservation, and so those folks have different concerns than some of the other folks in the county. And how do you work it all together, right? We just don't deal with that up here in Utah County. And so,
Right. Right.
right, I love that. And then yeah, just from there, yeah, then what does the state do and what does the federal do? So how do you start to implement this, right? Especially because it feels like the federal government is cramming down all the time. So how do you fight that back? How do we turn that around first?
Well, I think Utah has done everything at the executive level to signal to the federal government that we want to work with them, that we want to be partners with them. And I would change that narrative overnight. I think probably just my election would send a signal that Utah
Right.
is not trying to be partners with the federal government. Parents are not trying to be partners with the federal government on raising their children. It's like respect the personhood, the parenthood, and the
Hmm.
statehood of Utah, and if we do that, good things will that'll bear good fruit. Whereas if we like clump all those things together, then we end up with what we're doing. So I think just that change in leadership would send a strong message. There's a story that I love, and it's Norm Bangerter, when he was the governor. The EPA from Washington D.C. contacted him and said, "We're coming out to shut down a couple of plants there because your air quality has exceeded the standards, the federal standards." And Governor Bangerter said, "I'll have my people meet you at the airport, and if you get off the plane, I'm going to have you arrested." They flew in and they sat on the tarmac for 4 hours, finally refueled and flew back to Washington D.C. The net effect was those industries weren't shut down.
Right.
Utah survived, but it sent a strong message to the
Uh-huh.
federal government and to the people of Utah that, hey, we've got a governor that's going to stand up for our industries. If that happened today, you'd see the governor meet President Biden at the airport and take selfies, as we watched happen after he shut down
Right.
the uranium industry, closed down the Arizona Strip here a few months back. And those types of things send a strong message. You wouldn't you wouldn't see me, bowing to the woke ideology, using pronouns and things like that. It just wouldn't happen because it's inappropriate. It's not what a state does.
Mhm.
It's what a administrative subunit of the federal government does. Like, oh, we need to give them deference and homage so that they give us all these good things. And I think, again, I'm going way off track here, Charles, but yeah, the signaling is that we're a state and we like being a state. We like being Utah. And if the federal government wants to go off a cliff, we don't necessarily have to follow them.
Well, you keep saying you're going off track, but these are the issues that I'm hearing people concerned about, right?
Me
It's
too.
like, hey, look, right? They tried to shut down the power plant down in Delta, and the legislature came back and said you're not doing that, right? Which good for them, right? You talked about pronouns, and there was the transgender in sports bill, right? And the governor vetoed it, and the legislature came back and said, no, we're doing this. And there are examples, where they haven't pushed back, or maybe they've taken a little longer to come around in the legislature. But these are the issues. These are the issues that I hear people saying they're concerned about, especially in the governor's race, where it affects this stuff. I also have a number of family and friends that they work in rural Utah in mining or farming. And you mentioned the EPA, but they come in and they crack down on these industries, and it just makes it really hard for these people to make a living. And so, yeah, you're going off track, but you're going off track in places where people are going, hey, look, this affects my life every day. I want my kids
Absolutely.
to be able to go to school and play
Yeah.
sports and have it fair and safe. I want to make a living. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. This is not, abstract for people when they are on the receiving end of some of these changes. And we've seen
Mhm.
businesses that are, no longer viable in Utah, energy businesses. And it's not because there's no lack of demand for energy, but because the government has regulated them right out of business. And then
Right.
the real sinister part, and the part that is just impossible for me to accept, is you get behind that policy and you find out, well, this was not policy that was done for conservation purposes. This was policy driven by groups, special interest groups, who had
Hmm.
found a way to manipulate and leverage the Bureau of Land Management to accomplish their design, and their designs
Right.
are not good. I live down on the south end of the state near the Page
Yep.
power plant, and so we watched the Page coal-fired power plant destroyed. 1,200 people lost their jobs when that happened,
Yep.
mostly Native Americans, and now you've got people in Page, and this was all done, to appease the climate
Hmm.
activists. And now the people in Page are saying, why are our utility rates going up so dramatically? And it's like, well, you realize that
You have to import
that
power.
yeah, that the plant that we tore down was what generates that power. And sometimes the environmentalist groups and the activist groups, they really are not concerned. They're just not concerned
Yeah.
with the effect. It's like the ends justify the means, and whatever damage is done to the local community, they don't live there. They live somewhere else, and so they
Right.
come in. They're willing to destroy San Juan County. They're willing to destroy southern Utah. They're willing to destroy Utah
Hmm.
altogether if ultimately it serves their purposes. And that's one thing to have that flawed ideology, but then when you see the people who should be protecting that going along with it. We
Hmm.
in 2023, the legislature allocated $40 million to save the Great Salt Lake. A week after session, they turned around, whoever was in charge of allocating that money, and gave $40 million to the Nature Conservancy and the Audubon
Oh
Society to buy
gosh.
up the water shares of alfalfa farmers. And I said, and so when they came back to report, they didn't present it that way. We didn't know that it was just going to go straight to these environmentalist groups. Came back to the legislature, and I said, if the state wants to put alfalfa farmers out of business, can we not do that on our own? Don't we have DWR or DNR? I mean, that can just
Right.
go out and do that. Why do we have to go through these people? And I said, where I come from, and the Audubon Society was in the meeting. I said, where I come from, the Audubon Society is not our friends. They shut down our roads, they sue our
Hmm.
counties, they close our industries, and now we've just given them $40 million to continue on with that type of activity. And that's where you start to lose faith in the state apparatus, and what's
Right.
driving those decisions. Then you get behind the scenes and you find out that some people, and in my estimation, Governor Cox is one of them, who is not working for the interests of the state of Utah. He's working directly contrary to the interests of the state of Utah, unless you're a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and then that makes large campaign donations, things like that. Then he's working in your interests. I don't mean to sound cynical, but that's exactly what you find when you start looking through when you follow the money. It's not right.
Hmm.
Utah should not be in that position.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and it's interesting too because you see some of the other things that Governor Cox has pushed forward, like the affordable housing thing, right? And I can tell you that's caused no end of issues up here, right? The planning commissions weren't ready to have that many people moving into the cities, right? They had to junk a whole bunch of plans. It's caused traffic issues and utility issues and all kinds of things, and it didn't bring down the prices.
No.
I don't know if you have a solution to that, but
Well, this again, we meet and decide to give $300 million to developers.
right.
Um, but then you it's like peel back the layers of the onion. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
which developers are in line to receive that money? And it's the ones who are connected to that apparatus already. So you've got this really flawed apparatus that is
Right.
driving house prices up because you're throwing a bunch of public money at the housing market that's driving the prices up. If you're connected, if you're willing to play the game, then
Mhm.
you get favors. If you're not willing to play the game, then you're excluded entirely. And so not only are citizens excluded from that market, but a lot of the contractors that are just wanting to go out and build single family homes for people who need
Right.
houses, they can't afford to do it because the cost of regulations have gone so high. The hookup fees for utilities, um, uh, unless they're willing to go and build high density housing that the government favors, or build government buildings themselves,
Right.
or go build large homes for people that can afford to spend that money. And it leaves the average Utah, a wife and a few kids, husband, wife, a few kids. It leaves them out of the loop. They're just really
Right.
hard to break into that.
Yep, absolutely. So how do you fix it? You kind of pointed at some issues, but can you really peel that back?
Yeah, if we're talking about housing, let's talk
Mhm.
about land. People need a lot. They need a place to build. The Bureau of Land Management owns 150,000 acres inside city limits of various towns in Utah right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some of those are prime for development. Some of them are not. The ones that are prime for development should be transferred out of BLM hands, opened up. And this is what Senator Lee's uh, you know, really fantastic bill called the Houses Bill is proposing to do. And then there's about 1 million acres on the outskirts of those towns that is also eligible. So you take a little over 1 million acres. That the 180,000 would double uh, the housing land inventory that's available now. You add that 1 million acres. Now you've brought the cost of building down, and Senator Lee's Houses Act talks about some homesteading. So it's like, if you don't have the money, well, it's whether you have the money or not, you've got to go and do some improvements on this land to earn the right to develop, to put your own home on the land. I love
Mhm.
that concept. Get rid of some of the regulations. We follow the International Building Code, which it's uniform, and I think builders like the uniformity of a building code. They know what
Right.
they're going to get. But Utah could have its Utah building code that I think would be much more in line with the needs of the citizenry
Mhm.
and what we're facing, instead of the international building code, which works whether you're in Paris, France, or you know Mexican Hat, Utah. So
Yep.
um, I think we could make much more intelligent regulations that would drop the prices significantly, and then stop throwing money into a market that's already inflated.
Yep.
It doesn't help. That money just drives the prices up. And again, those that are willing to play the game, maybe they're benefiting, but most other people are just seeing prices go further and further out of reach.
Mhm. Yep. I mean, it seems like we've been talking a lot about land. One other thing that I want to just bring up, um, and I was having conversations with people about this with like Bears Ears and Grand Staircase and stuff like that. But in Utah, they've apportioned one parcel in, I can't remember, 10 or however many, to school land trust, right? And so when the government messes with how we can use the land or whether or not we own the land or what we can do with the land, it directly affects how much money goes back to the schools.
Right. Yeah. Every township has 36 sections, 36 square miles, and four
Okay.
of those sections were
Hmm.
allocated to the state uh, to be in trust for the schools. So those are the SITLA sections, State
Hmm.
Institutional Trust Lands
Yep.
Administration, and yeah, so those sections are really important. Now, most of them, in the populated areas have been traded out, but
Right.
across the state, you still see this dispersed pattern of SITLA sections, which the environmentalist activists they hate that. They want those sections gone. They don't want to mess with.
Yep.
Basically, they don't want private land ownership. They don't want state land ownership. They want unrestricted control of vast areas of land, usually where there's a ton of minerals that are already proven out. That's what they
Mhm.
really want to shut down, like the Bears Ears in Cedar Mesa in
Right.
San Juan County, or the Grand Staircase, where the world's biggest coal reserves are found.
Right.
It's like this is it's all about
Yep.
protecting until you get. It's like this is not about protecting. You're locking up reserves and blocking
Right.
out competition. So, but yeah,
Which lowers our energy cost, and that money would go to the schools, and I mean, all kinds of
yeah,
good would come out of
yeah,
it.
yeah. So
Jobs.
so Sitla has a really important role to play in the state and always has, and that's why that becomes very very frustrating when you see them adopting the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance plan, Red Rock Wilderness Bill,
Mhm.
and then doing everything to conform to that, whether it serves the citizens of their respective counties or not.
Yep. Now, I want to change gears here just a little bit because we talked about some of these issues that affect everyday people, right? So we talked about schools, we talked about jobs, we talked about housing, but it's been interesting to kind of watch how you've been covered by the media, or in some cases not covered. Right? You do something and they don't cover it, or they do something like the article that was written about you. It came to mind because we were talking about Sitla, right? So they write this article about you and they don't cover the issue, right? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, yeah. My So here's the so you're sitting there with the Sitla people, and they're defending
Right,
the plan to swap out all of San Juan County's Sitla sections. Now I'm from San Juan County, so I'm biased. I don't want
right.
to see San Juan County damaged. But the executive director of Sitla kind of has the audacity to go and sell this bill to all the other legislators by saying our studies show that counties that have Sitla sections do better. Their economies are stronger. They have more job opportunity. Their
Mhm.
tax base is stronger. So that's why this is a good deal. It's like, well, maybe it's a good deal for everybody, but one person, the one that you're taking everything from,
Right,
and I said, there's a word for that. It's called plunder. And government was instituted to prevent that, not to facilitate
right.
it. So like knock it off. Well, instead of knocking it off, now I become the enemy of Sitla,
Right.
and we get into this confrontation over this last bill. And I said, you guys aren't going to be content until you go give away all of the effing land. And some people, and I use the
Mhm.
actual swear word, and people don't understand. It's like the deal that is being contemplated. That adjective seems appropriate
Right.
appropriate for the situation. And honestly, some people you don't get their attention and if you don't speak honestly and frankly. And I want to only speak honestly and frankly. And when you go for 2 years fighting the same thing, asking
Mhm.
for some concession, asking for some consideration, and getting treated like you're the enemy, then at some point you need to either use some strong words. And I was running a bill at
Right.
the same time, and so yeah. So the story that comes out is that I'm a misogynist because I used this word. And I said, well, I wasn't talking about the people. I was talking about the deal. I said this deal and this,
Right.
giving away all of the effing land. And they said, well, do you want to make a comment? I said, well, I didn't stutter the first time. I, 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 I hope I've made myself perfectly clear, if nothing else, whether it's tactful or not tactful. I hope that I've been clear about how I feel about this. And I sent a huge email to all of the legislators early on in the process, saying, this is what we're talking about. This is what we're dealing with. And Sitla will say, well, we're the trustees of this land. We're the stewards of this land. It's like, no, the legislature are the
Right.
trustees. Look at the Constitution. Look at what it says. The
Mhm.
legislature, we have the fiduciary responsibility to the beneficiaries. Sitla is just there to help us out. We've delegated all of this authority to Sitla, and Sitla in the past has been, I have been their biggest defender. I
Mhm.
love Sitla land. And I love their autonomy. I love that they're almost
Yep.
like private property, and I would support that board for years and years. Was their biggest defender. So then when they turn on you,
Mhm.
it's one of those things. It's like, okay, well, if now Sitla has become an extension of SUA, Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance, then it's time to dissolve Sitla. So yeah, we went into the thing not on friendly terms to begin with, but the big media story, and that's what you asked again.
Yeah.
The media wants to cover this story. So when the story came out, I talked to the person that wrote it. I said, did you do you know anything about the Sitla deal? Is that part of
Right.
this? Is there any relevance to that? Never mind the fact that there was apparently an investigation done on the word that I used, but they never talked to me about that. They didn't come and say, hey, what's your side of this? So everything,
Right.
and this gets us back to there's these two sides, and one of them is the institution, the administration, um, the establishment side of things. The media's lined up with them. We see not the church, but the church news and this like
Mhm.
apparatus that tries to add this air of legitimacy uh, and authority that doesn't belong to them, and they do everything, and it's like just cheating
Right.
across the board and stacking the deck and whatever it takes. And then as soon as people on the other side, honest people who have rights too, as soon as they
Mhm.
say, hey, this isn't right, we want to see what's happening with the elections, we want to see if
Right.
Spencer Cox really got his signatures, we want to see this. Now you become the target of that apparatus. And if people this is my campaign speech.
Right.
If people are okay with that, then they will vote for what's going on. If they really want to fix things, if they really want to even know what's going on, they're going to have to elect a different governor this session and a lieutenant governor, and they have an opportunity to do it. I feel such urgency because there is an opportunity to make a significant change, and it's happening as we speak.
Mhm. Well, yeah, and I think you've stated the case with the media and the establishment really well. What's interesting is the other side of this, right? So you've got the establishment types, you've got the media, you've got there are a lot of insiders in the legislature and other places, that kind of back up the establishment. And then you've got the people on the other side where it's hey, look, like people like me, I guess, because I was out there banging on this post, putting in the sign, right? Because I believe in what you're talking about. I believe in the privacy and the transparency and the I mean, it's really refreshing to talk to you and just have a politician just shoot straight with me. This is what I think, right? And so I've been going out, but what's funny is as I've talked to the delegates across Utah County and in other parts of the state, it is amazing to me how many people have come out for Phil Lyman. And yeah, some of it's because we're tired of the shenanigans from the other side. But the other thing is there is this, hey, look, this is what you're going to get, right? This is who we are, right? It's not just, hey, this is a campaign speech, but it really comes across as this is who we are and this is what we're going to do. So, do you want to talk about kind of the grassroots? I don't even know, like the other side from the establishment and how that's worked for you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that kind of recognition, I guess, because that is, I only want the truth. I want only to tell the truth, good, bad, and the ugly, whatever it is. Let's just have a discussion about that. And it's not just in Utah, but across the country, people
So true.
are, yeah, they're kind of fed up. They're kind of fed up. I,
Hmm.
I was telling somebody the other day when we're talking about like whether it's January 6th or the Trump, the only thing we know for sure is that we're being lied to because
Yeah.
everything that comes out shows, oh, it is not what it appeared. The Steele dossier was not what it appeared. The
Right.
FBI was colluding against, and they were holding information. And so all of this stuff, when it comes to government, there is a dark side. The powers at the highest places that are driving these narratives. For example, we talk a lot about China. China's owning land. It's like, well, don't kid yourself. That's probably U.S. multi billionaires using China as a front to buy up land that they aren't just buying directly. Uh, this massive world wealth that's being tossed around right now, and BlackRock probably has more sovereignty than the United States when it comes to operating, internationally and things like that. So
That's
we,
not frightening.
yeah, so we say, well, we don't want China owning our land and our food and our uh, fertilizer and our media and our Hollywood and all this. Well they do, and if they don't, it's owned by large corporations. I think it's 2,300 homes just finished getting built out on the west side of the valley here in Salt Lake, and not a one of them is for sale. They're already all purchased by
Mhm.
a corporation that will own those. And I don't know if they'll sell them, if they'll just rent, probably just rent to people. That's a scary thing, and that also is
Yeah.
driving all of these issues. So you've got fewer and fewer people controlling all of the money, this oligarchy. And Utah, instead of pushing back against it, acts like, hey, we want to be part of that. Could we get a
Mhm.
$20 billion company to move to Utah, and can we help pay for your baseball stadiums and your gondolas and your whatever? And
That
I'm,
made
I'm
me
not.
so mad.
I like baseball. See, this is the thing. Like, we have to
Yeah.
sign a resolution. Who likes baseball? Yeah, I like baseball. All right, well, let's spend $1 billion of taxpayer money. And it's just like, no, that's not how government is
Yeah.
supposed to function. But that, when we talk about drawing the line between it starts to become more and more clear to me that there is a dividing line, and people either come down on the side of abusing government authority, or they come down on the side of protecting individual rights. And if we protect individual rights, then we respect the people, we respect the parents, we respect the
Yep.
communities, we respect the counties, and all of that. It works. It's a much better form of government.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, and it seems like the people who are kind of realizing that this is the setup that we have, right? Where, yeah, we're playing for big government, big corporations, big money, or we're playing for, hey, opportunities for my kids, and living the life I want to live and not being persecuted for what I believe. And I'm telling you, and it was very evident at the convention. I mean, people were just screaming and hollering when you got up, because we see the contrast, we see the difference. And what's funny too is that I've had a few people come to me and say, well, what's the deal with the convention, and why should we even do it? And I encourage them to run to be a delegate, because I've seen so many people come in on the one side, and then they start talking to people and they realize, oh my gosh, I have been giving up my freedoms and my opportunities, because I just assume that these people on the establishment side are my friends, and they're not.
Yeah. That convention went so late, or
Midnight.
11:45, and people are still,
Yeah.
4,500 people still sitting there in that. And
Yep.
there was and it was there's a lot of
Because it
fatigue,
matters.
because it matters. And I've thought about that since. I thought, well, maybe there was a lot of people that had left by that point. It
Hmm.
was it was I thought, well, maybe we need a 3-day convention. So by the end of it, you've got down to the people who truly do care. It's like, and that's what I felt at midnight that night, and people were breaking out, singing "God
Hmm.
Bless America" and things like that. It's like the 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 commitment and the level is like, those are
Right.
people who, whatever the cost of maintaining their freedoms and their liberty, whatever the cost was, those were the people that would stand up and do it. And then when I hear the
Yep.
criticisms and the, get rid of the caucus system, it's like, that's the system that's going to preserve all of our freedoms.
Yep. Yeah, and we're planning as a county party to do an episode of this show where we basically just break that down and explain
Yeah.
why it is the way it is, and what the difference is. Um so I'm curious, do you have any stories around kind of the grassroots side of this? Like, have you had, seen people out doing stuff, or had people come get involved in your campaign?
I mean, it's funny, and I think I'm going to have a little video out today, just of the signs that are put up in all the places. People at Lake Powell have a big sign on their houseboat. Um,
Mm.
People put a sign, on their condo as high up as you can get, and flying
That's
flags. You
fun.
get, yeah, a bunch of Jeeps that had a bunch of Lyman flags behind them, driving down in a convoy. And but the real story, I think, of our campaign is very much grassroots. It's people, uh, they feel it. There is a movement, and I say Spencer Cox is mostly responsible for this movement. I'd like to think that it's a rallying around me, but it's more saying we want transparency. We want
Right.
to be involved in this. Where they can see, Utah is number one in so many things. It's such a beautiful state, and beautiful families and people, larger families. Still have the largest,
Hmm.
average family size. We want to preserve it. We want that to persist, and don't want to see it go away. And they see the policies that we're doing taking us in a different direction, and then saying like kind of like, well, it's inevitable. That's what family size is shrinking. Inflation is growing. Whatever, home prices will continue to rise. And I say, well, not if we
Right.
take some action to do something about it. And then we preserve our second grade classrooms. As I
Hmm.
said, get parents more involved in the school. So instead of pulling your kids out of public schools, they're saying, I like public school because I have a voice. I'm not going to get prosecuted by the school board for coming and demanding that my kid have a fair shake. Things like that.
Hmm.
And also, like we said, it's not just Utah. It's across the country, and people are waking up. When we see the um, sham trial that's taking place with President Trump, more
Right.
people are activated to say this is not right. This is not America. That's not what we signed up for. And then you
Mhm.
learn about the details behind it, and I say to people, trust your intuition, trust your eyes. What you're seeing is what the truth is, and then what you hear in the media is the opposite of that. And so I don't know. Social media changes the whole
Yep.
landscape. There's stuff going on. Podcasts like this where people can actually
Hmm.
get on, and it still is America. We can still have a conversation like this, and maybe not without repercussions. Maybe there'll be some blowback, or get arrested and go to jail for something. But uh,
Right.
but it's still America. We can still speak up.
Yep. Absolutely. So I want to kind of get back to one or two of the other issues, just to, because I feel like you've kind of pointed out some of these contrasts. One of them is, and I'm not sure exactly how to put this, and you can probably state it more clearly than I can, but I keep hearing more and more about. I mean, we're not a sanctuary state, at least not by statute, right? There's been no bill passed or whatever, right?
Right.
But it feels like I keep hearing about illegal migrants being shipped in, or coming up through Arizona or New Mexico, and the state really not doing anything to address the issue.
Right. It is funny because you've got some states and cities that have like passed ordinances and say, hey, we are a sanctuary state or a sanctuary city, and
Uh huh.
ICE comes in, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and say, well, prove it. Are you going to like really give cover to these people? And then you got a state like Utah that says we're not a sanctuary state, and ICE comes in and says, prove it. It looks like you're doing everything
Right.
that would make you an ICE state. So most designations as a sanctuary are not done proactively by the state themselves. It's a distinction that's provided by ICE, which Utah
Hmm.
definitely had that and still has that listed, that we are an ICE, or that we are a sanctuary state. Um, and so the policies that we set that says we are not going to detain non-citizens in our jails unless they're ICE certified. Um, we're not going to detain them for longer than 72 hours. And that's a federal law that says you can't. So my response would be to say, if they break a law in Utah, they can sit in a Utah jail. And if our jails are good enough for our citizens, they're good enough for our non-citizens. And
Yep.
then the federal government would say, well, we're going to sue you because now you're detaining non-citizens longer than 72 hours outside of an ICE facility. The contrast is to say, okay, well, even though they've you know committed a violent assault on a child and videotaped it, which is exactly what happened a couple of years ago,
Uh
those
huh.
we're only going to give them probation because we obey federal law. And that's exactly what the governor's office said at a recent meeting that I was at. And they stood up very proudly and said, well, in Utah, we believe in following federal law. And I was like, well, I've got children in this community. I don't believe in
Right.
putting predators and fentanyl dealers back out onto the streets of the community. We are not required to do that. And any law that says that we are is a bad law, and it has to be pushed back against, disobeyed, if that's what you want to
Hmm.
call it. Let the federal government come and sue us instead of saying, well, we're gonna sue the federal government. The governor's really proud of saying we've got 60 lawsuits against the federal government. Yeah, but you're going along with everything that they tell you to do, and that's
Right.
so the sanctuary state is definitely an extension of that dynamic.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and we have the 10th Amendment, right? And if they break Utah law, then yeah, don't they fall under our jurisdiction or our rules?
Yeah. If the power is not delegated to the federal government and are reserved to the
Right.
states, where do they get off telling us you can't detain a
Yeah.
fentanyl dealer in your jail? And if they're not
Yeah.
going
I
to
would also
deport them, so yeah, and the states, it's hard for states to deport. The best thing we can do is move them across the border, which is like what's
right.
happening to Utah now. It's like send us your people from New York or Nevada or
Right.
whatever, because it's hard for us to deport, which is why we need a change in administration at the federal level and somebody that
Hmm.
has a strong deportation policy. Not because we're discompassionate to people, but because
Right.
we're compassionate to people. We believe in protecting our own children, our own um, communities.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, and one other thing I'll just add, because I've talked to a couple of sheriffs across the state, and if you want to know if this is a problem for reals, like call your sheriff's office and ask
Right.
them. I mean, that's I don't have to say anything else.
I'm glad you mentioned that because the sheriffs are doing such a fantastic service to the community because they're from the
Yeah,
community. And if they don't, they're going to get
and we elect
unelected.
them.
Exactly. They're the only law enforcement that's politically accountable through an election process. And they know that. And sheriffs are the most popular elected office in the country. People love their sheriffs, and sheriffs love their people, and they protect their people. And if the state steps in and says, hey, that's all well and good, sheriff, but not anymore. Now you got to let these criminals back out on your streets. It causes a real dilemma for law enforcement
Mhm.
unnecessarily.
Yep. I have another issue I want to bring to you, and this is something that we all lived through with COVID, but it seems like they're trying to make bird flu a thing now, or maybe bring back COVID or something else. Um, I mean, what's your take on, because we talked also about businesses shutting down and a bunch of that happening during COVID too. And it was just because they basically got told they couldn't be open.
Right.
So how do you approach something like that?
So this came to the floor of the House during COVID, during the discussions,
Mhm.
and I quoted some Supreme Court justices that said, the Constitution is in place to manage these things, and if you set it aside during a crisis, then you're setting it aside at the time that it is most crucial and most
Right.
most applicable. Yet we say, well, declared emergency will set aside the Constitution. And if the people go along with that, and if the legislature says, well, okay, if it's an emergency, then we'll give up all of our rights. Guess what? You're going to have an emergency, and it's going to be a
Hmm.
crisis. And we learned that during COVID. That was the lesson I think that we learned is that the American people will comply if you say, well, this is serious. So okay, all right, we'll give up our rights, and I'll call the hotline if I see someone standing too close to someone else. Um, and hopefully, people, after seeing the aftermath of that, realizing that they were lied to in such a serious way, would totally reject that. And I asked the question. It was actually of Governor Herbert. When he was still the governor. And it turns out that Spencer answered the question. But as I said, is a
Well, he
Republican?
delegated it all to Spencer Cox
Yeah,
anyway.
but the question I asked was, is a Republican form of government insufficient to handle a crisis such as COVID? Um, and that's a good question. It's like, no, we
Hmm.
we got to set aside a Republican form of government and go into dictator mode just to handle this situation. Well, if we say, okay, well, if it's really serious, then you can be, a tyrant. Then you can bet we're going to have another crisis. And I think one's coming. I think they're going to try it again. And
Hmm.
I think most of the nation is going to go along with it. And I think if I'm the governor, Utah is not going to go along with it. And
Right.
I loved, and I probably have misperceptions about how South Dakota handled this stuff, but when they came out with the mandates to shut down the businesses and do all this stuff, Christy Noem said, "We're good," and that was kind of the end of it. There was no czar, no
Yeah.
COVID czar, no hotlines called, no. She said,
Right.
people in South Dakota can make their own decisions, and what a beautiful way to
Hmm.
run a country to say, well, people are smart, they'll do the right thing, and we'll give them all the tools they need and try to help where we can. And uh, I'd love to see Utah be in that position.
Yep, absolutely. So one other thing that I've kind of brought up with all of the different candidates, and I think COVID's a good example of where this matters, right? So, and I've set the context this way, basically. So I was a delegate. I've been a delegate since 2016, state and federal, or state and county. And so, when I was talking to folks in 2018, running for whatever office they're running for, right? I wasn't asking people about pandemics because I didn't know we were about to have one, right? Or have a fake pandemic, whatever your flavor, right? But I didn't know, right? And so I was asking
Right.
people about, oh, what do we do about this issue or that issue, right? Um, and so I was very focused on just some of the issues that we have ongoing here in Utah. But since then, what I do is I like to sit down with the candidates and go, okay, here's the deal. Something's going to come up, right? It may be a natural disaster. It may be the federal government crams down something else. It may be, there are a million different things that it could be, right? And so what I want to know is, okay, Phil Lyman is sitting in the governor's office, right? And you have to make these big decisions. What's your thought process? Like, how do you decide, oh, this bill is something I'll support, this bill isn't? Or, hey, we've got this problem that I need to solve. Here's how I'm going to solve it. What what matters? What informs your decision? Who do you have talking to you? That, so that I can feel good about, okay, we have another COVID that I didn't see coming. Phil's going to make the right decision.
Right. Number one, I would want the truth. I really would want people close to me who would tell me the truth of what they're seeing. And then the second thing is the Constitution. And I don't say that in a like a knee jerk reaction, but that's the contract that we signed. That's the way this organization operates, is according to the contract. And so if it takes away individual rights, if it steps on parental rights, it's not constitutional, and it's not going to happen. And I would rather have as Thomas Jefferson said, the inconveniences of too much liberty to not enough liberty. So trust the people, give them the correct information, educate people. If there was a pandemic, and a legitimate pandemic, and we came out and said, hey, this is happening, and it's dangerous. You should shelter at home. People would shelter at home. But if we come out and say you have to shelter at home, my first reaction is that's not proper. You can't
Right.
make that edict. Something else is going on here. And so they undermine their own credibility by issuing mandates and edicts and getting vans and calling
Mm-hmm.
hotlines, and kind of like they did with what they do with elections, where they put up billboards. We're the
Right.
gold standard of elections. Everything's safe and secure. Nothing to see here, folks. If they understood that what they're doing is basically showing their hand, uh, um, I would do the opposite of that. I would inform people, and people don't want government to do more with less. They want government to do less with less. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
get back in your space. Empower the families, empower the people. Put money in the people's checkbooks, not in the state's checkbook. That's not what we're about. Is building this big surplus. And so that's what I would do if I were the governor. My American dream is kind of like you alluded to be able to, have a house and live a peaceful life and be involved in the community and go to your kids' baseball games. That to
Mm-hmm.
me is what government has got to be focused on, not bringing all good gifts to people that are really not their place to give in the first place, and not to offer security that you can't control, such as like security
Right.
from a drought or security from a pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's interesting, and I just want to highlight this because this has been kind of a pet issue for me, and I'm actually starting a show to this effect, a podcast. I've been podcasting since 2008,
Nice.
um, but um, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because I feel like it's so important and so core, and we just don't talk about it enough. Because you've talked about empowering parents and about what people do and where they get the truth and things like that. And as much as I hear people kind of getting wrapped around the axle of, hey, this is what Congress is doing, or this is what the president's doing, or things like that, it seems like a good chunk of your focus is not just on, hey, this is what the state does, or this is what the state should be doing, this is what the federal does, this is what the federal should be doing, but it reflects who we should be, right? And so it's what I'm doing at home, right? What I'm teaching my kids at home, what's happening at the school, and how I'm involved and have control over that, right? Or what's happening in my local community, and how involved I get in that, and what difference I can make there, right? All the way up the line. And so um I'd be curious to know, and this isn't something I've asked anybody else, but it seems like you've kind of got this idea. Who are we? In Utah, who are we?
That's an interesting question. Um, as you're talking, I'm thinking, well, bureaucracies make poor decisions compared to the individuals. But when you say, who are we in Utah? We have kind of a collective identity, probably
Hmm.
more so than other states, which is interesting. And it probably makes us vulnerable. We're a compassionate state. We're a caring state. I've always said Utah is kind of a bandwagon state. I think people would almost rather be wrong than to be out of step with the neighbors around them. That's changing a little bit with some of the things that are happening. But yeah, who are we? And uh, ultimately, we are human beings born on this planet with one life to live, and we want to live it. We want to be free to live our lives. I think that's universal. I think that is humankind, and that is the Declaration of Independence. These truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal and have these inalienable rights. That's really, really, hopefully, that's fundamental. And in Utah, uh, I think we understand that. It's interesting because I got asked the other day, why are you so popular with the LGBT community? And I said, oh, I didn't know I was. And they said, yeah, our polls are showing that you poll really well with the LGBT community. And we wondered if you knew why. And I thought for a minute, I said, well, maybe because I believe in individual liberty, that wherever you are on the political spectrum, freedom means freedom. I don't want to tell somebody how to live their life. I want them to live their best life and follow their American dream. If you want to be a billionaire, God bless you. I know a few of them, and I respect them. If you want to, be a school teacher and make a difference in the lives of children, God bless you for that. Um, and hopefully that's who we are as individuals. At the end of the day, I hope we don't ever become a hive like mentality. Somebody the other day they called Utah the behave state, and I thought that was interesting. But yeah, we're waking up. People are saying, yeah, I will conform. I will comply. I'll be part of the greater good. I'll do all those things, but not at the expense of my identity and my individuality. And Utah's pretty unique that way.
Yep. Awesome. Well, um, I think I've kind of asked everything I wanted to ask. Um, where do people go to support you if people are thinking, oh man, this Lyman guy, he's the guy?
Well, right now to their mailbox because their ballot is sitting there waiting to be
That's
mailed
true.
in. So it's happening right now, and yeah, uh, we're in a mail-in ballot system, whether we like it or not. It's a mail-in ballot system. Get your ballot, fill it out, mail it in, take it to the county office if you don't trust the post office, and hand it over that way. But go to lymanforutah.com. It's LYMANFOR Utah.com. Our platform's on there. It's a great website. Lots of content. If people want to learn more about, reach out to us, reach out to me personally. I get a lot of phone calls from people, and I try to answer them, and it's exciting. It's exciting what's going on. We want people to be engaged and really paying attention.
Awesome. I'm just going to reiterate it here. Lyman4utah.com. I'll have the guy that does my video make sure that it's there so you can see it on the video. But
Yeah,
yeah,
social media, Twitter and Instagram, Facebook. I mean, we're blowing it up on Instagram, and love seeing people engage on social media. So
yeah.
search
Well,
for
and
us there.
I've been telling people that this is kind of a longer game, right? People think that, oh, we get Lyman in and it just all fixes itself. Folks like Phil, we got to get them in, and then we've got to support them as they start implementing the stuff that we want to see. And the best place to start is, yeah, by mailing in your ballot and then going to lyman4utah.com and donating or volunteering or signing up or doing whatever else that we can so we can make this happen.
Right, right. And what you're doing. Thank you for that.
Yeah. I do it because I love it. And I do it because, yeah, you talk about that American dream, and that's what I want. And that's what I want for my kids. Right. And I want to be able to have them grow up in a society that, supports them in whatever they're going to do. And it feels like we're losing that. And, I feel like you're the right person to make that happen, or at least get us headed back toward whatever the right track is.
Yeah. And I just want to comment on your wallpaper behind you, the backdrop there. Delicate Arch, that's in Grand County, looking over into San Juan County, and the flag
Yeah.
above it. That's you could almost see my house from there
Yeah.
if you can see past the Blue Mountains down in the distance. Anyway, beautiful picture, and I love this state. Love everything about it. The mountains, the rivers, the wildlife, all of it's so great, and it's worth getting engaged and learning the issues.
Yep. All right, well, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thanks again, Phil.
Thank you so much.
All right, till next time, folks. Max out.